Hello and welcome to the Equity, Families, and Student Voice breakout session. My name is Dave Gamon. I'm a teacher from Mead School District in Spokane, Washington. I will be your host for the session. Assisting in the session is also Jeannie, who will provide tech support and will be monitoring the chat. She's actually running the show. Thanks, Jeannie. I would like to introduce your presenter for this session, Troy Hughes, principal of Northwood Middle School, Mead School District. He and I will be sharing our journey to equity this morning. Good morning, Troy. Thanks for coming and sharing your story.
Good morning. I'll go ahead and share a screen here and share some slides. And hopefully you guys can see this. And this is not where we're supposed to be, but we'll go back. So thank you for coming, everyone. It's impressive commitment being here on a Sunday morning. And so thanks for coming and thanks for having me, Dave and Jeannie. So I guess we'll just get started here. I've been at Northwood Middle School for 3 years as the principal. This is my 3rd year. And so I started before that at Lakeside High School out in 9 Mile Falls and came out this way. And so two of the things that drive me in education as a principal and before that as a teacher have always been this concept of we believe in you. I know that when students believe in themselves, when adults believe in kids, when adults believe in each other, they can accomplish more. I guess I believe the most powerful influencer in students' lives that I've ever seen is belief. And so that's, even Hattie would say student efficacy is or staff efficacy in students is the #1 predictor, or has the greatest effect size for achievement. So, and then there's also something that maybe if you've worked with me, you would hear me say, we can't miss a kid. And that kind of drives, to me, that kind of encompasses equity, is the we can't miss a kid thought. And if you're filtering everything you do through that, hopefully that leads there to better equity. So when I walked in here 3 years ago, though, you never know what you're getting into. And so you're coming to a new place with a lot of complex stuff going on. And when I came in, I found out after I got the job, I think one of the first things they told me that we were in the middle of an investigation over some racial bias stuff, and learned about that. And there was some findings and things that we needed to do. I still kind of figured that the best thing to do would be to watch and learn and see what's going on. But one of the first thing I did is I reached out to some of the families and wanted to hear their stories of people who had issues with some of the way that we did things. And that was really helpful to just hear their perspectives. And then you're able to watch and see if you see what they're saying. And so one of the first things I started to do too was starting to look at the data, and the data shows, we have gaps, and we don't need to go through all this stuff. I mean, you guys all have your own slides at your own schools, and everybody has gaps. But we had some very significant gaps that we needed to work on. So you start asking questions of how and why do these exist, and how do we go about closing them? And this is the we can't miss a kid concept still. If you have gaps with students with disabilities, then what are we doing to support students with disabilities and helping them help close those gaps? Some more data. I'm going to move through these fairly quickly, but and one of the things I talked about too is, so our vision for the future is that red dot is our school. It's right about on the line of where we should be. But I think it was real common that there was a perception that our school was one of the outlying dots. And when you looked at all data, it found that we were kind of right about where we're supposed to be. And so one of the ways that you become an outlier is is closing gaps, is help. And that's not the goal for some kind of show or something, but you're doing a good job if you're moving that dot, and you're impacting more students, and you're helping more kids, and you're helping kids from different demographics that maybe weren't as helped before. So the goal was to move off that line. I believe that what our kids can do is a belief, and it's all in the culture. And so I love this this quote: "My teacher thought I was smarter than I was, so I was." And you don't just say you believe in kids. Kids know whether you do or don't, and it's all through your actions. It's through what you do. You can say it all day long, but just saying it is one thing. But what systems do you have in your place that prove it? When kids go to classes, are they being challenged? Are they being? I mean, when we believe in somebody, we challenge them. We believe they do more than they think they can, and we push them, and we support them. So if you have high expectations, you also have to have a high level of support. And so it's one thing, you can have high expectations, but then how are you going to support each kid? We can't miss a kid to get to that bar. And so if we're going to raise the expectations, you have to look for every hole where you can raise support. So one thing about Northwood and the Mead School District, not just our school, but equity, I don't think had been much of a discussion in the past in many places. And so, like I said, the plan was to watch and learn for my first year. And it's just the kind of person I am. That lasted about 4 months. I promised myself that we weren't going to do anything different the first year. I just wanted to learn. And I discovered that I'm not really capable of that, because when I see a way we can help kids, we're going to do it. Like, we're going to figure it out, and we're going to do that. I saw places we needed work. I knew for challenging courses and honors coursework and things like that, that kids didn't have a choice. That system 4 months in seemed too complex and too difficult to crack. And I knew that in special education, most of our kids, probably 95% were segregated in certain courses, and put in, there wasn't inclusion going on, but that was a difficult system to break into as well. So where do you start? To me, our leadership course was an access point. So it was kind of low-hanging fruit. I didn't have control of some of these other systems, but I knew you could start there. And we had a leadership system where students had to go through, there were barriers to get in, whether it was GPA to access it, teacher recommendations, essays you had to write. And so I knew that we could restructure and start there and start looking at a different kind of kid. My belief is that all kids are leaders, and they all have leadership ability, and it's our job to teach leadership, not just find who are, quote, traditionally students who we traditionally think are good leaders, but to give all students access and help them become leaders. So that was kind of where we started, and that was we restructured the leadership class. Now we did disparity data and student access. Now the demographics of a course like that look a lot like the demographics of our school, versus beforehand where it was mostly white, mostly girls, and few boys. Is kind of how the leadership class looked before, and it's looking more like the demographics of our school. When you let students choose, they choose right, and things look different. They choose different than adults. Adults don't. When we choose, we don't get it right. I just know that when adults choose, we choose wrong, and so students always know. So we also wanted to start working on celebrating our students and helping students be seen. And so you can see like things around our school, like whether it's Black History Month or Native American, whatever it might be, starting to celebrate that and notice it. So, and then a lot of questions. Started having conversations with staff, and I'm really kind of a one-on-one conversation guy. So I might talk to each English teacher and say, hey, why do we not let a student take a challenging course? Why do we kick a student out of a class if they have a C and take them out of honors English? Why do we do these things? Most people can't answer that. You know, if they say, well, we do that because they don't belong in that class, I would say, name one class in your life that you've been kicked out of because you got a C. And most people can't answer a question like that. And so you just start asking questions about why, you know, why do we do these things this way? I don't know if you can speak to that, Dave.
I can. And let me just first say what I appreciate about this kind of leadership is that you ask the hard questions. You ask the why. We don't just assume it is what it should be and we leave it unchanged. I think this begins with listening and caring. And as you listen and care and hear from students, hear from parents, and begin to understand it, then we've got some hard conversations. And I think it's the willingness to have the hard conversations around why we do what we do and what's best for kids that then leads us to a better place, especially with equity and diversity. And that's where we are, asking the hard questions about traditional practices that I'm not sure we have good answers for, other than that's the way we've always done it.
Yeah, and some of you here today, as you watch this, I want to acknowledge that that you might be like, well, no, duh, we've been doing that for years. Well, for us, we weren't. And so this is kind of, I guess, more about how do you get there? What's the way to go from a place that hasn't really focused on this to a place that is focusing on it? And so everything that we do, looking through using the lens of equity. And I was really fortunate because you can't do this work alone. And I have Dave Gamon, who's very passionate about this work, who I teach with. I have a social studies teacher named Tina Edgar, who's very passionate about this work, and has a great vision and is very effective at making those visions become reality. Pat Round in athletics, who's an athletic director and a teacher here as well, who shares the vision. And so a team of people that said, yes, this is the right thing. This is where we need to go, and could never do it alone. We wouldn't be anywhere alone. So, and then always using the data. I think the data speaks the truth. So always coming back to, is what we're doing working? How could we seek out the data to find that? And then how could we support where it's not, or what could we change? I decided to start a community equity advisory. I knew that I needed to hear the voices of our community who haven't been heard. And so some of these people that joined the team had students that went through Northwood maybe years ago, and then went through our high school system. Some of them were current parents. We tried to pick a diverse group of community members that could help us think through some of these things. And our first meeting, we just listened to stories about experiences in our school. And some of those I think were really hard to hear because some of them were really tough. But they need to be shared and they need to be heard. And then this team, we met monthly, and we went through everything. There was nothing kind of that wasn't on the table, whether we're talking about race or socioeconomics or special education, our data, where we're achieving, where we're failing, our discipline systems. This team saw it all and a lot of changes happened from the ideas of this team. A lot of what we've implemented in time have come from this team of community members who provide feedback. And I always invite staff to come. They're always welcome. And sometimes a new staff member might show up. But Steffi Nobles-Beans, who works at Whitworth in their Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion program, she's in the middle of that picture. She said, just keep inviting them to the table. You keep inviting them and they're going to come. And so that's one of the things we try to do. Oh, did that just pop up on my screen? I don't know why my email does that. Shut that down. There we go. So this team was really instrumental in our progress, and it was a good idea. And so if there's any schools out there looking to go down that path or increase their equity in their building, get a team together, bring in the community members, bring in the parents, make it diverse, and hear the stories. That I think that was probably one of the most powerful and impactful things that we've done, is to bring the community into this discussion. But it's also scary. It's also, it's like, okay, because when you do that, you're gonna have tough conversations, you're gonna hear tough things, and you've got to be willing to hear them. And fortunately for me, I don't ever go on the defense. I like to hear, and I want to hear the truth. And I feel that Dave is like-minded, and I feel that the team of teachers who are passionate about it in our school are like-minded as well. So when you're thinking more, I just have this picture here because this was a virtual Veterans Day assembly. But when you're looking at everything through the equity lens, you start looking at everything through it. So we asked the Air Force, when they came out, to send a diverse group. We want students of color in front of our students. We want to see themselves reflected in who we bring into the school too. Little things like that. We started a student equity advisory, and new students who weren't maybe a part of something in the past are now being invited to be a part of these discussions as well. And a member of our equity team would come in and talk to them at lunch, and they could come up to the library and had some really, really good conversations. And this became a valuable. We haven't done this year, but I want it to come back. This virtual year and then hybrid system, every other days of school, and all that. This was something we did a year ago that will bring, my goal is to bring back next year, because it made a big difference as well. One of the things that came from our equity team, our community equity advisory, was a diversity, equity, and inclusion art contest that we kind of coupled with our Martin Luther King celebration. And we asked and really it was kind of one of their ideas, and then Tina took it and ran with it and created something really valuable. The first year, about 60 students district-wide participated. This year, maybe we were about 90 that participated. It's getting maybe too big now, but we want to keep it going because it's really valuable. And they create art that speaks to what equity, diversity, inclusion means to them. And then they turn in their artwork and we hang it on our walls. Northwood's a pretty new school. It was built 3 years ago. Now it's an old school, but a new building was built about 3 years ago. And the walls are pretty bare. And so we thought, how could our students see themselves in our walls? And so these artworks are hanging all down through the hallways. And one of the crazy things, in a school with 850 kids, no one's touched them. The 2 years that we've ran this art contest, nobody has touched them, vandalized them, done anything. And just to have one of the great things that students do as well with when they present their art, and I think you can probably, if you can see me, there's one hanging on my wall from the first year behind me, but underneath it, they attach who it is, what the title is, and then what it means. A one sentence description of what their artwork means. And just to have those words on your wall that our kids are deciding what our culture is. And they decide right too. And then you'll see kids walking down the hall, reading them all, and have student voice interact. And it's been a great thing. And I don't know if you can speak to that, Dave, or your thoughts on.
Well, again, I think you post what you value. And as we walk up and down the hall every day, I think they're seeing a very different view of equity and diversity. And it's weaving itself into our culture, which I love. Mrs. Ediger, who also does leadership, has put up some incredible stuff around the school, quotes, just being aware of issues in our society, and then really moving forward and saying, let's actively set culture. And so if you want to scroll through those pictures, Troy, from the bare wall to the after picture, all of our walls are looking like that. And I think that weaves itself into culture. We're actively setting culture. And I think it also speaks to our staff and what we value as a staff in getting behind this and saying, this is who we are. This is what it means to be a Northwood Husky. And so we're excited for getting beyond the pandemic, where we can do more active things like a Husky training camp, like more of those leadership workshops with our equity committee, because all of those make us stronger together.
And so, yeah, what do the walls say to our kids, and what do they say that we value? But I also know that it's not enough just to, sorry, that picture's kind of fuzzy. But this one I also have hanging in my office. It was one of my favorite from one of our 8th graders. Our first year we did the art contest, and she did a great job with this one. I tried to blow up that picture so you can see. Olivia Tripp said the name of this artwork is Diversity, to show uniqueness and humor, and that there are differences are loved. And I love that. And she has picture. There's somebody in a wheelchair there. There's, different colors represented. It's just, to me, that was an example of the kind of stuff that kids can do and turn in. It was magnificent. So, but what next? So it's not enough just to change your walls and to have a team that's externally outside of the school, a community team helping. We had dabbled in leadership and tried to make that look different. But what next? That's not enough. And so one of the things we did is an equity audit on our school. I had my assistant principal do that, and he sat in his office for like 3 days and was a trooper. And he's really good at gathering data and kind of put together what does our school look like, who has access, who doesn't, who's achieving, who isn't. And that kind of data is what you need to show the need for the we can't miss a kid. And what we found is that we were missing kids. That's not something I put out in the public newsletter, but if we're going to be honest with ourselves, like we're missing kids. We can do more. A disparity report. We had conversations, questions, experiments with different things along the way. Some worked, some didn't. Our social studies team took on the task of including, one of the reasons we chose social studies is because they teach everyone. At this point in our school, they teach IEP students, they teach non-IEP students. Every student takes social studies. That's not the case in math or English and some other courses, but in this one, there's access to all. And so they started teaching some racial literacy skills. We had problems with students using racial slurs. They were popping up. It was getting kind of ugly. The N-word was being used a lot. So the best thing to do, let's teach them. Let's get ahead of this. Rather than it felt like whack-a-mole for a while. Kids were coming in here and I'd hammer one and it'd pop up somewhere else. And we'd hammer one and it'd pop up somewhere else. And it was, for me, that's really hard to hear. I don't like that culture in our building where people are willing to hurt others. And so how do you get ahead of it? Is they started teaching racial literacy and just what is a microaggression and what does it look like and what does it mean and what does it do? And what is, real simple, sticking to the facts, but we have seen a strong decrease in the use of that kind of language here. And as a result of that, we also knew staff needed training. So we did with our social studies department, we did some equity training. We've done some with the leadership team. I haven't been able to do it school-wide yet, but I'm excited that I think it's coming this next year. part of it's the time with the craziness of the shutdowns and this, that, and the other. Some of our days have been taken away, where at one time we'd be able to have training and haven't been able to. But our superintendent has now started a community equity advisory, and one of their callings to him is training. Staff needs training. I know that. Some staff don't know it or don't think they do, but we do. We need that training. And when you have these community equity teams, they call you out. You got to do it, because they're right. It's really smart people that come together and have good ideas. And so if you do nothing, you'll lose that team. And the team will go back to that, well, it just is what it is, and they're not going to listen. But if you make progress, the team will come back. One of the big systems that we needed to start getting into was special education, because our special ed courses would show that they're overwhelmingly minority, they're overwhelmingly low economic. And so we had to find a way to get our special ed students into gen ed classes. I believe it's a human rights issue. I believe that every kid should have access to challenging coursework, to grade level curriculum, and to our best teachers. If we don't do that, to me, that shouldn't even be tolerable. But how do you do that when there's unions involved and contracts and systems that have been in place for years and years and years? Well, one of the things that we started with is I just eliminated a special ed course and stuck the special ed teacher in a room, team teaching with our gen ed teachers in English, which I know many of you have these models. This is nothing new, but kind of started with one. Now we have inclusion on all grade levels 2 years later. And we're working on we're going to have an inclusion in math next year as well. And we had been doing some of these inclusionary type things in special education, but mostly it was like, oh, this student's ready to graduate. Let's see if we can stick them in a gen ed math course. And well, now students who are on all levels are able to access gen ed curriculum and our teachers. The data has shown great success with these students who have entered these courses. And so breaking down our systems of class selection and barriers for kids to access these types of courses is huge. Is it harder for a teacher? Yeah, of course it is. It's harder. And sometimes teachers would come back and say, I can't teach this class. There's too many. Just teach, expect them to do it and teach it. Know that they can do it and teach it, because kids can. It's not like these classes we're teaching are Harvard classes. We're a middle school. Get them in there, teach them up, they're going to grow. And I think that's one of the biggest culture things we need to ask ourselves. Are we about growth, or are we about achievement? If we're about achievement, then yeah, let's segregate. Let's make sure that kids, but if we're about growth, then it's okay to enter a challenging situation. If we're going to put a special ed student who's struggling into our gen ed, how do we support then? How do we support? Does that mean 2 teachers? Does that mean a para comes in to support? Does that mean that we have support courses for that student as well? So maybe they're doubling up, but if we're going to expect them to do it, then support. But one thing I know is they can do it. And so that was a big step to just starting with, you just start small. One class, and it grows from there. And luckily we have a special education teacher, Patty King, who's part of that team that really believes in this, that really believes that kids can do more than we think they can. We got to put them in positions to do it and then support them. So do we believe in kids? I think you can ask that question all throughout your school. Now we're in a place where we have open enrollment for honors courses. Kids choose. And different students are accessing it. When we look at disparity data, when we were choosing, it seemed like we kind of chose one type of kid. When kids are choosing, different demographics and different races are much more represented. So looking at band and orchestra access, Talking about rethinking what we learn. I've talked to those teachers about bringing in some, music or multicultural type of stuff to play, more voices to be heard. And we have a Compass program. It's called Compass. It's a behavior program. Our first year of that was really excluded from gen ed coursework and opportunities in the school. And our leadership teacher has kind of taken them under her wing, and now they're doing more things with leadership and helping out around the school. And it's been really valuable for them. That's just inclusion. That's bringing them in, say you belong. Let's make you part of this. Looking at physical education and some changes we can make there. Like I said, our social studies, equity training, racial literacy. And then we really strengthen our Native American curriculum in social studies by teaming with our local tribe, and did some of that work. That wasn't work that I did. That was work that Mrs. Ediger did, our Tina did. But when you have like-minded people working around the school, they start to see where, hey, we could do this here. And we've increased student choice. Right now, our special ed teachers are doing some Yes We Can training, some UDL training, and to keep advancing that special education and inclusion. One of the problems we're facing now is we have kids leaving as 8th graders who now their IEP says they're in gen ed coursework, but our high school isn't ready, or they're wondering how they're going to do this now because they have this huge influx of kids who have in their IEPs say need to access general education. So sometimes it creates problems and frustrations and backlash, and you face. But I believe you got to keep staying the course if it's the right thing. If it's the right thing, you do it, and we figure it out and how we're going to do it. And so sometimes it creates good problems to solve. I don't know if you have anything to add there, Dave, but.
Well, whenever something's not happening, it's either you don't know or you don't care. And once you know, you can't play the don't know card. Now it's just a don't care. And again, with leadership, what we've said is, let's figure out what we don't know. Okay, now we know. Now, if we do nothing, we just don't care. And care means we keep taking steps toward equity. And again, what I appreciate about the leadership model in our school and the priority on growth is that if we care, as we know more, we must do more. And we're willing to take those hard steps. We're willing to have dangerous, hard conversations. And what's cool is looking back, it doesn't feel like we're moving very fast. But when you look back, we've covered real ground. We're moving the ball down the field. And sometimes in the midst of COVID, it feels disrupted and confused and wondering, have we made that much progress? And yet even now, looking at where we are and where we're going, it simply takes the conviction to keep going and do the things we need to do around student-centered growth. If it's all about student-centered growth, then we must change to do what's best for kids. It can't be around teacher comfort. It can't be around teacher culture. It has to be around student-centered growth. And you nailed that. That's exactly what we're doing or trying to do.
Yeah, and we've added some other things just by chance, but we have some social emotional learning school-wide now, which we didn't have. We had an access time, which was really helpful, a way for students to choose the support they need or for teacher to assign support. That went away with COVID. We tried some different formats of it through some virtual situations that didn't work out very well. Oftentimes students who need the most support have a hard time showing up to a Zoom, right? And so it's nice when you have them all here, but now we're back to a place where they're all here and we have control of that again to help get that support. So I'm really thankful for that. We added some after school interventions and supports, and we increased instructional time with our kind of shortening of lunch and passing periods, which I am a believer that we're here to go to school, and so that instructional time is important. The more we can get, the more we can do. We looked at some other traditional systems like our discipline with an audit. It's interesting how tightly schools will hold to, or systems will hold to systems. Like they'll hold on to these things that maybe they're not the best way to go about it, or maybe it will still work if we do something different. And so some of the, we did an equity team review of our discipline, and we changed some discipline system, our dress code. We had these things called demerits that we were using that were really, I don't know that there was any evidence that they were working, but they certainly did remind students that if there was a consequence, there would be another one as well. And then another one maybe a few months later, because you have too many demerits to do whatever it is that we're doing as a school. And so through this work with an equity team, through these audits, through the data, we were able to come to a place where maybe those aren't needed, and we can do things differently with that. So, and I have shortened this down because I do want some time to talk. And so I'm kind of moving quickly through some of this stuff. I still feel like we have a long way to go, and that the work just won't end. We'll come up with better ideas and better ways to help kids as we go. We may find some of the stuff that we're doing right now isn't working, but as long as we keep looking at the data and keep coming back to, we'll start to know what is working and what isn't. I still don't think we've seen the impact yet, because we got this ball rolling, and then we had COVID and the shutdown and weird systems of school. We haven't seen the impact yet of some of the things we're doing. And so some of the, teaching of the racial literacy skills, to the things that we hang on our walls, to the increased access to leadership, to teaching SEL school-wide, to inclusion in our gen ed courses. It's going to take some time to see the impact of those things. But if you know they're the right things, you keep doing them, you keep looking at the data and adjusting as you go, and finding out how to do it better or what needs to change. Mead now has that equity committee district-wide. They stole some of my people, some of my good people, but was glad to see it advance more from just Northwood to maybe, I know West Valley is using our model. Another school district in Spokane is using that model as well for a community equity advisory. One of my assistant principals and one of my equity team members are Marzano Framework equity specialists, so they can do trainings around the state too and work on some of that. Inclusion and team teaching at each grade level now, which is a huge advancement, coming from a system where that didn't happen, to get to where we're doing it. And I hope there are lots of impacts that we don't see. I'm hoping that I guess what I mean by that is I hope that a student in high school learned that they could do something here, like take a challenging course, and that they'll continue down that path. I believe that we can change a trajectory in a student, and middle school is the perfect time to do it. And some of this access could change their trajectory for life. And so we might never see that. We might not know, but I guess that's my hope. I believe that it can. We're not doing a breakout, but this was kind of some questions. Some of you, again, might have sat through this and said, we already do all that stuff. Well, maybe you have ideas for us then. I'd love to hear them, because I'm all ears and always trying to learn or listen.
Right. We have some questions in the chat
Yeah.
that could stimulate. So one of the first questions is, how did the community respond to teaching microaggressions in the class?
Honestly, I haven't, surprisingly, because when you take a step like that, you wonder, okay, you kind of brace yourself, like, what's going to happen here? Are we going to get phone calls? And especially, we're a pretty conservative community, and right now more than ever, everyone knows that the division is high, and it's hard to go, but that's why we chose to teach racial literacy. We're teaching fact about what these words mean. We're giving students literacy and the ability to understand what is, in middle school, you'll be surprised, some don't even have a clear definition of what is racism. That's one of the, what do all these things mean? And then what are the impacts of them? So sticking to that, we haven't, I mean, I had a couple of phone calls on some stuff like that. I know our high school equity leaders created a video for social studies to talk about something. So our high school leadership team got involved and created a video. Some students, they started a Black student union. So they created a video about this stuff, and our social studies teachers showed it in their classrooms. I had one parent call and said, "Why do you have Black Lives Matter students presenting to our kids?" And you get some of that stuff, but I responded, well, they're not Black Lives Matter students. They are our student leaders at the high school, and kind of went through that they're helping support the learning that we're doing in the classroom. And some may still disagree in the end, but you know what? In my opinion, what's right is right. And so, yeah, that's a good question though. There's can be tensions that come with some of that. There's every once in a while there's a Facebook comment or something, but
But if I can,
hasn't been that bad. Yeah, go ahead.
As a teacher talking to other teachers, there were a couple comments that would bleed out in their classes that made it clear that students didn't share that same opinion, which was fine. But I think having your teachers own the information and respect the information and be owners rather than renters is a big deal. You've got teachers that are really asking our students to critically think. I think if you had a teacher going, "Yeah, I know, but I have to teach this stuff," and then they become a renter and really not honoring the information, then it's a different conversation and perception. But when you have teachers that are really bought into this and stakeholders in it and really believe the veracity of what they're teaching, that makes a huge difference, because then they can have real conversations in their classroom around critical thinking and meaningful conversations.
Another question, Troy, is do you have English language learner students? And if so, do gen ed teachers receive support on how to adapt lesson delivery to meet those student needs?
Yeah, we have an English language learners, and this was something that actually started at Northwood my first year too, that hadn't existed here before. If you go back in time, it started long before that, but they had determined that all EL learners would go to one middle school where they increased supports. When I first came in, I fought against that, and I said, I want my EL students back. I believe that they should go to their neighborhood school. We shouldn't be busing them somewhere else. I want them back. And so they brought them back, and they brought teacher support and paraeducator support. And so one of the models we use right now that I don't know if I like, but I'm not exactly in control of this, but we cluster them into courses with support, with paraeducator support, and then they stay on one team, where that team of teachers, because we team here, students kind of have, what that means is a group of students have the same core content teachers throughout the day. And so they would be on one team where those teachers are trained and go through training probably about 3 times a year, some different strategies for supporting EL learners. I still feel a little bit like it's kind of like segregation. That's one of the things we're in conversations about now. What's the best way to do that? And I don't know though. Maybe I don't know enough about it. I'm open to thoughts on that.
Do you mind if, this is Heather Byington, do you mind if I ask a follow-up question on that?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just curious, because in our district, we are looking at how we're going to continue providing that support for general ed teachers who are getting training to support EL students. I'm wondering, I love that you have them clustered and you have them with the same team of teachers. I think that's so powerful for integration, planning together, for relationship building. When they receive training, is that inside your district from like an instructional specialist or coach, or is that something that they go outside of the district to get, the teachers who are getting training?
That's a great question. Our model at this point has been our EL teachers are very passionate and very bright. They're smart. So we're fortunate to have the ones that they do, and they will do the training. The teachers, and then our Rob Haugen, who works at the district office, who is in charge of the EL program, will help with that training. I'm not as involved in much of the training, and that's probably good. I might not be smart enough to be, or know enough to be. So we have some smart people working on that with our teachers.
Nice, thank you. I also love the way that you as a principal trust the others around you with their expertise, and that you bring them in as co-leaders. That is so powerful. I've had a principal like that before and grown so much under a principal like that. So thank you. Thank you so much for your work.
Well, I need really smart people around me, and I
Yeah.
need to use them and let them go. And I love it when a teacher has a passion and a good idea to take something. I'm kind of like, take it away, man. Let's do that. Like, and I'm here to support and help. But
Absolutely.
Another
Thank
question,
you.
Troy, is do you have thoughts on transferring some of these experiences to the elementary level?
do I have thoughts on transferring them to the elementary level?
Correct, yes. I guess someone's looking for help on how some of these structures could be applied at the elementary level.
I think almost everything we talked about could be, I mean, applied there. I know the way that kids go to classes is different, and special ed works differently there. I know one of the things we're facing is some of this special education inclusion work has to bleed over to the elementary school. And I am glad that it's a district-wide initiative now. And so it creates a problem if we're, like, let's say, overqualifying for special ed services at a young age, right? It creates a problem if we're, so, you know, what are the reasons that we're doing that? It creates a problem if certain demographics are facing harsher discipline at a younger age, right? But I've never worked in an elementary school, but I think if I were to sit down in one for a year, I think we could find some stuff to transfer over.
One
And
of
Dave,
the
you might be
things,
able to add to that, Dave. I think that the culture work is in every level.
Mhm. I think the principles of leadership you've used can be used anywhere. Gather leadership around you, get the stakeholders from community and staff, and then start asking the hard questions. How do we help our students grow? How do we help them see diversity as a beautiful thing that we should pursue? What does equity look like at the elementary level, at the middle? Because it's going to look different in every community. The key is, do you know, do you care? Are you willing to listen? And then if you're willing to listen, then care. And what does care look like? It's going to look different in every community.
I would say that one of the things at the elementary level, being a special ed teacher at elementary, is looking at training for general education teachers around intervention strategies and data collection. Historically, what tends to happen is a kiddo falls below grade level based on, you know, STAR scores or iReady scores that are only taken twice a year. And maybe they don't know sight words, but there is no data actually collected on which strategies they're using to provide intervention besides title and lab. How does that fall into tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 within your building? You know, and then other systemic issues, you know, like currently our CBA indicates that special education students are basically, you know, distributed, for lack of a better word, in a one-to-one correspondence to classroom teachers because they didn't want to have, you know, 3 heavy hitters in their class and IEP meetings, which used to be a problem, right? But that only actually helps general education teachers in their workload. It doesn't help special education teachers in their workload in terms of scheduling, clustering kids by similar goal areas or similar service times to be able to provide push in and inclusion supports with paras, or to have time, as a teacher, if we're teaching reading or math, I could go in and co-teach for, a lesson, even if it's here and there, right? And so there are a lot of systemic and historical practices that limit understanding of how to accommodate, how to provide modifications, what does differentiation look like, what are intervention strategies being used to support kids, what does the data show about providing intervention related to referring for special education and over-identification of EL students or students who are, free and reduced lunch populations, things like that, that we are finding in our district that are relatively high. And our EL population is pulled out. But why? Right? Because there are there's 1 or 2 in each class instead of 3 or 4 or 5 to provide small groups or to support during a whole group lesson teaching vocabulary or things like that. So I think there are a lot of things that contribute to mindset for teachers, mindset for kids, and then systemic barriers where we just circle the wagon and we talk about how things need to change, but because no one wants to actually do the work, because it's hard, because it's an investment of time and effort, because it is scary, right? To say, am I being biased against kids, right? It requires a certain level of self-reflection on our own practices to say, am I always, referring EL kids for reading as a SPED student? And then if it's an initial eligibility and a kid is evaluated, why is it that we automatically assess reading, writing, and math instead of looking at the data that says, well, they're successful in math, why would we evaluate that? And then that leads to overassessment and overqualification of kids when really they might not need special education, but they might need intervention. So
one part of that is probably increasing your support systems within the school to support, because when you don't have a lot of support systems, well, the easiest support to jump to is an IEP and a special ed qualification. But if you have more support systems, then you should be relying on those support systems prior to ever using that one. And so I for the elementary piece, like how I just think I try to simplify and stick to, we can't miss a kid. And then you got to hunt down where you're missing him and then not do that, not miss them. And so I kind of,
Right.
I try to look at it that way.
Okay, Troy, we have another question. Do your teachers involve community leaders or parents to speak in the classroom?
I think we would be further ahead there without COVID.
Mhm.
We were having some of our equity team coming in, like I said earlier, and doing some things. And I think we're at a place now that we're kind of full-time in person, that more people could come in. But I think there's a long period of time there where really nobody came in. Parent volunteers, I do feel like, oh man, we were rolling, we were doing some good stuff. And then everything, it felt like everything got stopped.
Mhm.
And it feels like rebuilding now. Maybe we have some rebuilding to do and rethinking, but yeah.
And then a follow-up to that is, what kind of teacher training did you implement initially to begin the equity conversations? Was it a training or a conversation?
Well, it's been conversations and training. You start having some conversations in your leadership team. You start sharing some of the conversations with your equity team. But then we also, Heidi Schillinger, I think it's Heidi, is it Heidi? We went to actually a conference with our social studies team. And I went to a conference with some leadership people too, where a training, equity training, that we paid for out of our building budget, and because we felt it was important. So the biggest thing we need though, I feel like from that work with our community equity team, one of the first things they said is your staff needs training. That needs to be a commitment of training. And I feel like that's a commitment I haven't completely fulfilled yet 2.5 years later. And it doesn't sit well with me. But part of, in a big system like this, to get your whole staff, either a full day training or more, that takes that's a structure that sometimes is beyond me, that takes so I've been working with my bosses, and like I've had pressure on that this has got to happen, and I think we're all in agreement. Now we got to figure out how to make it happen. We did have I can't say, I mean, district wide last year, Anthony Muhammad came and did an all day presentation to our whole district, and that was equity work. So we have had some, but that was, I also have a vision of some other types of equity work as well, so.
Thank you. Another question is, how did you go about building your community advisory group?
That's a great question. So some of it was Dave Gamon's and Tina's, and some asking staff, like who's out there that would be good to be involved in this. And these people had been at Northwood for 15, 20 years and knew community members who would be good on a team like this. But I also had others join who I had, through that first year, I had difficult conversations in here surrounding race with maybe some of our treatment of their kids and what they felt it felt like. And so I included some of them too. I kind of identified, hey, you're smart and you have a passion for this. And so when we put that team together, I called some of the people that I had conflicts with. Maybe not conflicts by anything that I had done directly, but our system, or maybe something I had done directly. I don't know, maybe, but regardless, trying to keep my eyes and ears open for looking for people that would be good to include, and then asking for help. And Dave might be able to speak for that a little bit about our team.
Well, I think you have to know your community. And so Troy found the people that know our community. And then we simply made suggestions about the people that would own this and would give valuable insight, and people that cared. I mean, if you find people that care, it's so much more effective than finding people that just want to sit on another committee, but not really do anything. We found the doers. And I think if you can find the doers that have a vested interest in that conversation and want to see things happen, that will motivate things to happen. We have a committee that expect things to happen. They're not just a committee that want to sit and meet every month just to put on a show. I think they want culture to change, and they have a vested interest in that cultural shift.
Thank you. Okay, so we have 3 minutes. One more question. Please share your process of getting the equity audit started. What are the tools and how does that get launched?
I wish there were, and there might be a simpler way. But the way we've been doing it up till now is going through kid by kid. And I don't know if like Power School or Skyward or whatever system he's using has a better way to do that. We didn't have it. And so that's another area where like we could be doing this better and way smarter and way easier. And I don't know, but part of ours was going through kid by kid. And what does access look like, and going through each of our remedial or advanced courses, and each of our, going through our disciplinary report kid by kid and looking at race or socioeconomic or disabilities and seeing where they land. And so when I say we, I really mean my assistant principal, because he is the one that he's passionate about it though, and wants to, and so he's been a trooper and willing to do that work to go. And I think that's really valuable work. And so there's got to be a better way though.
Oh, and Troy, didn't we do a Google form as well? So surveys, getting feedback.
Yeah, we've done some stuff like that with the Google form, but when really doing the audit work of where is each kid placed and what does their achievement look like.
Right.
I know the state does some basic stuff that you can access through SPI, and we access that stuff and Tableau and some of that stuff. But if you want to really get down to kid by kid, we've had to do that work.
Well, it is 11 o'clock. So thank you for coming to this session of the conference. We encourage you to tweet something you heard in the session that resonated with you. Remember to use the hashtag WATEC 2021, hashtag Washington Teacher Lead or Teach Lead. You will have 15 minutes now between now and the next session, which you don't want to miss. Take a quick breath, stretch your legs. We'll see you in there at 11:15 for the Student Voices panel. Be sure to refer to your online agenda for the webinar link. Thank you for coming, everybody.